More people in the outdoors is a good thing, right? Our natural places are changing for the worse, and a key driving factor behind it all is social media. Visitation to national parks and participation in outdoor recreation have been on an exponential rise in the past decade, exacerbated recently by a certain virus. More people than ever are getting outside. Why wouldn't this be a good thing? We all want to visit the best places, experience the best views, and with the convenience of social media, anyone can learn of these places in an instant, and the results can be devastating. Erosion, rubbish, graffiti, human waste, local traffic disruptions, adjacent small towns overrun, and the development of extensive infrastructure to cater to heightened visitation. This is the price we pay for sharing our adventures outside. If we take the problem at face value, then social media is to blame. But the real problem isn't so simple. Geotagging. The act of tagging the specific location of a photo or video on social media. A seemingly harmless feature that allows others to easily learn of and subsequently visit worthwhile hiking spots or lookouts. But that is the problem. You would think that geotagging is incredibly useful and insightful. It removes all of the headache and effort behind finding the whereabouts of these worthwhile destinations. Simply open Instagram, scroll, and you'll come across dozens of videos with the specific location of that spot either in the description or in the video itself. But what happens when 10 people do the same thing as you? What about 100? 1,000 even? With the scale of social media, 1,000 people viewing a post is not that much. These viral posts have the capacity to reach millions. This amount of reach is unprecedented, and places that weren't designed for this exponential increase in foot traffic are suffering. A quintessential example of this is what has become of the classic Western Arthurs Traverse in Tasmania, considered to be perhaps the toughest multi-day hike in Australia. As of recent, this trail has seen mass coverage on social media. It seems that everyone with a camera wants a piece of the hype behind this trail. And who could really blame them? It's a stunning landscape, just look at all the photos. But due to this increase in online coverage, what was once a wild walk is now under the mercy of overcrowding. I've personally heard many accounts of people describing piles of rubbish and toilet paper left behind rocks in the trail, toilets flooded with human waste. Now, these remote campsites that are on the trail look like caravan parks of the amount of people that are in them, and there's been a rise in search and rescue calls. It can't be argued that geotagging hasn't had a significant impact on this World Heritage listed area. The Western Arthurs Mountain Range is an incredibly remote and inaccessible range located within the Southwest National Park in Tasmania. It's about as hard as on-track walking gets. If an area of such remoteness is suffering the effects of geotagging, then what about the areas that are more easily accessible? If the access is easy, then the attracted demographic broadens, and things become disastrous for the outdoors. However, I'm not convinced that social media is wholly to blame. The problem goes a bit deeper than the obvious. This isn't an issue of social media, this is an issue of accessibility. Social media has become somewhat of a modern scapegoat for a lot of problems in today's society, and geotagging is an example of this. Geotagging certainly has a negative impact, as there is no doubt that it contributes to funneling hordes of people into small, fragile areas, but geotagging, in my opinion, is more so an issue of increasing accessibility to the wrong kind of audience. The act of researching and finding interesting locations is not the creation of social media. Magazines and primitive online forums have been around long before social media was even a thought. So why wasn't geotagging an issue of the past? Not everyone had access to these magazines, and not everyone had either the technology or the know-how to access online forums. Now, everyone has a smartphone, and accessing social media couldn't be easier. This may be a generalisation, but the people who tended to scour online forums and magazines for their next big adventure were most likely skillful, experienced outdoorsmen with a deep respect for the environments that enabled their passion. Now, what is the demographic of people who view trendy, geotagged outdoor posts? With how good algorithms are nowadays, it's probably anyone with the slightest inclination into doing something in the outdoors. A very broad demographic. The demographic of people attracted to easily accessible viewpoints and short hiking trails are more than likely tourists without much outdoor sense. They either lack the environmental awareness, the respect for nature, or the education in how to coexist with a sensitive natural area. Litter, human waste and graffiti are more so the consequences of disrespectful tourists rather than just simply an increase in foot traffic. but the two seem to go hand in hand. The more popular the area, the more developed it becomes to accommodate the crowds. Wild places become metallic eyesores with handrails and fencing, and in Australia, these developments are becoming the new normal, requiring serious opposition to protect these natural areas that supposedly should already be protected for conservation to coexist with recreation. It's a topic that I've already extensively covered in the past, and one that unfortunately continues to spread, spurred on by this accessibility movement. While geotagging itself isn't the core issue, it certainly contributes to increasing accessibility to sensitive areas, and the influencer or creator has a responsibility to try and mitigate the impacts that their videos might have. While you'll find no shortage of geotagged videos or sponsored posts driving foot traffic into sensitive areas, you will struggle to find any content relating to educating people on how to correctly behave and respect the environment. If an influencer with a massive following decides to post a video that revolves around geotagging, they should feel responsible to spread the awareness of leave no trace principles. This, to some, can come off as condescending, which is a weak argument. It is not condescending to teach people how to correctly treat sensitive environments. It is evidently necessary, and it wouldn't be condescending if you did the right thing in the first place. If you think videos regarding leave no trace principles are condescending, then you are acknowledging that the creators who make these videos think that they are better than you. And they are if you are one to litter and vandalise wild places or just the outdoors in general. If you knowingly choose not to follow leave no trace principles and don't want to be educated on them, then you are a lazy, selfish, and vile human being. You can say all you want online, bring up any argument that you want, call it condescending if you will, but your actions speak for who you are. Good luck on trying to defend this kind of behaviour. The extent to which this poor behaviour is visible just demonstrates that more people need to be educated on leave no trace, and influencers have the greatest capacity to reach the most people. Rather than just leave it up to parks authorities, anti-leave no trace behaviour needs to be actively and continuously discouraged in our online hiking community, more so than it is right now. But again, geotagging is an issue of accessibility rather than of social media. Social media is just the catalyst that exposes the real problem. There is an ongoing argument, at least in the Australian hiking community, that we should forego all conservation in order to increase accessibility for the people who either lack the fitness or the skills to hike in these challenging, remote environments. This argument is clearly visible in the continued spread of ecotourism into national parks and World Heritage listed areas. The establishment of great walks consisting of extensive and intrusive infrastructure designed solely for the purpose of attracting typically wealthy, unskilled and dependent walkers. Now, if you've seen my most recent video on consumerism in the outdoors, I argued that barriers to entry into hiking weren't a good thing, but this was in regard to a general barrier to entry into beginning hiking as a hobby, not lacing up hiking boots for the first time and trying a hike like the Western Arthurs Traverse. There are obvious and necessary barriers to entry that discourage and prevent inexperienced walkers from attempting such a challenging hike, at least for most people. A beginner needs to spend time increasing their skills, knowledge and experience, naturally progressing the difficulty of their outings until they can confidently and safely take on a hike such as the Western Arthurs Traverse. When developments seek to remove this natural progression in favour of immediate accessibility for literally anyone, so long as you've got the money, it places far too much emphasis on recreation and neglects the need to uphold conservation. After all, national parks in Australia are established to reserve, preserve and protect the environment for the benefit of the public. This involves maintaining a balance between conservation and recreational activities. If the sole purpose of national parks was to conserve, then we'd all be locked out. If the purpose of national parks was only for recreation, then there'd be scenic helicopter rides and roller coasters in Kosciuszko National Park.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Why shouldn't people have to go through the discomfort of learning the necessary skills, gaining experience, and becoming fit enough to hike in areas of significant challenge? This is how it has been, and this is how it should remain, because it is fair. What is unfair is trashing the environment for others and creating financial dependent access to public land, making accessibility more so about income rather than skills and experience. The solution is not the implementation of more modern infrastructure, as this only caters to the unexperienced and uneducated hikers who are causing the environmental issues in the first place. Yet in Australia, because of the money-making potential of these great walks or tourist regions such as Kosciuszko or the Blue Mountains, all legislation seems to be ignored and concessions are made for developments to continually go ahead, leaving it up to independent organisations such as state national parks associations and the Wilderness Society to challenge these developments when the law and the government won't. You can hear this destructive way of thinking right from the mouth of the New South Wales Environment Minister Penny Sharp. I don't think it's a good thing that the only people who can access a place are those who can carry all of their own gear and do it because they're fit enough. In other words, people want instant gratification, and the Australian government is willing to rip up World Heritage areas to give it to them instead of promoting hikers to carry all of their own gear and be fit enough to do so. With the explosion of interest in outdoor recreation in the past decade, a lack of education and acceptance of the challenges of Mother Nature has made itself apparent in the way our national parks are being treated. Issues such as geotagging are only considered problems because of the way the beginner into outdoor recreation behaves. There is a lack of education and there is a lack of skills progression. This is why practically no one seems to understand nor care for Leave No Trace principles, why consumerism is so rampant in the outdoor community now, and why national parks continue to be exploited only for the interests of inexperienced walkers. This is what happens when you replace challenge with painless accessibility, either through how easy geotagging makes it for you to find that next trendy lookout, or how ecotourism developments remove all the challenge of walking in wilderness areas. Littering, vandalism, and spikes in search and rescue are all consequences of a lack of education and skills. And the figures don't lie either. Every beginner hiker's favourite app, AllTrails, has surveyed its participants here in Australia, and the results are exactly what I'm discussing here. Only 1 in 3 participants know what to do when they get lost, only 38% feel confident in basic hiking first aid, and only 6% feel confident in treating a snake bite or an insect bite. It's no wonder that so many people also seem to forget about Leave No Trace principles. But let's not just moan about the issue, there is a clear and obvious solution. We need a renewed focus on outdoor education. Every issue that I've outlined in this video, geotagging, ecotourism, low adherence to Leave No Trace, and spikes in search and rescue, it all comes back to a lack of proper outdoor education. From the beginning, better hiking has been an avenue for me to share in my knowledge and skills in hopes that others can learn from my experiences and go about their own outdoor adventures in confidence. I know all too well of the difficulties of being a beginner to hiking. Believe it or not, I've only been hiking for 3 years, but I made it my focus to improve on every single outing, no matter how small that improvement might have been. And I'm very proud of what I've accomplished in such a small amount of time because I had to work hard for it. Now, after spending some time and looking more into this issue, I know that I need to do more. Not all of you are beginners, and if you aren't, I urge you to pick up some of this responsibility to educate our fellow hiker, especially if you have an online following of any size. And for those of you who are just starting their hiking journey, don't be afraid of challenge, but make sure you're prepared for it. Seek out proper education, take a wilderness first aid course, or seek the mentoring of someone with more experience. With that, I'm excited to announce that I'll be offering my own online coaching service, dedicated towards helping hikers of all experiences grow their skills and confidence in the outdoors, with a focus on hiking in the Australian Alps. If this is of interest to you, I have a link in the description that will give you more information. Otherwise, thanks for sticking to the end as always, and stay subscribed if you haven't already for more informative and value-driven hiking content. Thanks again, and happy trails.